My name is Amber, and I am 27 years old. Looking back now, I still cannot believe how quickly my entire life fell apart and how close I came to losing everything I had worked so hard to build. If someone had warned me just 6 months ago that I would soon find myself limping alone down a freezing dark road in the middle of the night, holding my crying baby tightly against my chest with numb hands and a broken spirit, I would have laughed in their face. I was strong, independent, and I had everything figured out. I owned my own car, I had a career I loved, and I had just welcomed a beautiful baby daughter into the world. Life felt full of promise. But sometimes the people closest to you can slowly dismantle everything you are piece by piece until you no longer recognize yourself. When my husband, Julian, suggested that we temporarily move into his mother's large countryside estate to save money for our own home, it genuinely seemed like a smart and practical decision. His mother, Beatrice, was warm and enthusiastic about the idea. She painted a lovely picture of a supportive family home where she would help me through the exhausting early weeks of new motherhood. She spoke about family dinners, shared laughter, and a peaceful environment for the baby. I believed every word. I trusted her completely, and that trust became the biggest mistake of my life. The moment we finished unpacking our bags, the warmth disappeared entirely. The welcoming smiles faded overnight, and the house transformed from a family home into something that felt more like a carefully managed institution. Beatrice began controlling every small detail of my daily life. She had opinions about how I fed my daughter when I was allowed to rest, and even how I spoke inside her house. Every decision I made as a mother was questioned or overruled. Every time I pushed back, she found a way to twist the situation and make me feel foolish for even trying. Slowly and deliberately, she began poisoning Julian's mind against me as well, whispering things in his ear until he started looking at me like I was the problem. I went from being a daughter-in-law to feeling like an unwanted guest who had overstayed her welcome in a house she was supposed to call home. The moment everything shifted from emotional control to something far more serious happened on an ordinary Tuesday morning. Julian came into our bedroom looking uncomfortable and avoided meeting my eyes as he explained that his car had completely broken down and needed expensive repairs. Before I could even finish forming the thought to offer him a ride, Beatrice appeared in the doorway behind him like she had been standing there the whole time. She did not phrase it as a request. She announced with a cold and polished smile that since Julian was the one going to work every day, he would simply be taking my car keys from that point forward. I immediately protested. That SUV was mine. I had bought it entirely with my own money before Julian and I were even married. It was my property, my independence, and my only connection to the outside world. But Beatrice looked at me with barely concealed contempt and told me that a new mother had absolutely no reason to be driving around the countryside alone, and that staying home was better for the baby anyway. I turned to Julian, waiting for him to stand beside me, to remind his mother that she had no right to make that decision. Instead, he stared quietly at the floor and mumbled that his mother made a fair point, and that we all needed to make small sacrifices during this period. My heart shattered in that moment. I watched my own husband take my car keys from my hand and place them directly into his mother's waiting palm. Beatrice closed her fingers around them slowly, and the look on her face said everything. She had won, and I had just become a prisoner inside a house that was never truly mine. The weeks that followed were suffocating. Without my car, I had no way to leave. The estate was miles away from the nearest town, and Beatrice had quietly arranged for my phone service to be disrupted so that reaching anyone outside the house became nearly impossible. My family tried to call. My friends tried to reach me. But Beatrice controlled the environment so completely that I was effectively cut off from everyone who loved me. I spent those weeks feeling invisible, exhausted, and completely hollowed out. I kept telling myself to hold on for the sake of my daughter, that things would improve, that Julian would eventually wake up and see what was happening. But things did not improve. They got worse. The moment that finally broke me arrived 2 weeks later. I walked into my daughter's nursery and found Beatrice going through my personal financial folders and reorganizing my baby's medical supplies without asking or explaining herself. When I told her firmly to stop touching my belongings, she turned around with an expression of pure disdain. I told her that my daughter had a scheduled appointment with her pediatrician that afternoon and that I needed my car keys returned immediately. Beatrice stepped forward instead of stepping back, and she delivered a slow, deliberate speech that made every hair on my body stand up. She told me that I did not understand what was best for my own child. She told me that she would be the one deciding when the baby needed medical attention. And then she told me that I should feel grateful they were allowing me to live under their roof at all. I called out for Julian loudly enough for the whole house to hear. When he appeared in the doorway and assessed the situation, he walked to his mother's side and told me to calm down and stop making a scene. Something inside me snapped completely. I grabbed the diaper bag and turned to walk away down the hallway, tears blurring my vision. I did not see the wooden toy block sitting at the very top of the staircase. My foot caught it and I went tumbling forward, landing hard at the bottom of the stairs with my ankle twisted beneath me at a sickening angle. The pain was immediate and overwhelming, shooting fire up through my entire leg. I sat there on the cold floor, gasping and crying, and I looked up toward the top of the stairs where Julian and Beatrice stood watching me. Neither of them moved. Beatrice sighed, said something dismissive under her breath, and they both turned and walked away, leaving me alone at the bottom of the stairs in the dark. That was the moment I understood with absolute clarity that I could not spend another night inside that house. No amount of hoping or waiting was going to change what these people were. My husband had chosen his mother over me completely, and if I stayed, I would eventually disappear altogether. Driven by something primal and fierce that only a mother protecting her child can truly understand, I waited until the house fell completely silent. Moving through the pain as quietly as I could manage, I packed a small bag with the essentials for my daughter, lifted her carefully into my arms, and slipped out through the back door into the freezing night air. The cold hit me like a wall the moment I stepped beyond the estate gates. The road ahead was pitch black and completely empty in both directions. Every step I took on my injured ankle sent sharp waves of pain radiating up through my body, but I kept moving because stopping was not an option. I wrapped my coat around my daughter as tightly as I could and pressed her face against my chest to shield her from the biting wind. My hands went numb within minutes, my tears felt cold against my cheeks, and a deep and frightening despair began creeping into the edges of my mind. I had no phone, no car, no money, and nowhere nearby to go. I was completely alone on a dark country road in the middle of the night, and I had never felt so small or so powerless in my entire life. I had been walking for what felt like a very long time when a pair of headlights appeared behind me in the darkness. My whole body went rigid with fear. My first thought was that Julian and Beatrice had realized I was gone and come after me. I clutched my daughter tighter and prepared for the worst. But as the vehicle slowed down and pulled onto the shoulder just ahead of me, I recognized the sound of the engine. I knew that rumble. The driver's door opened and the cabin light fell across a face that made me burst into tears immediately. It was my father, Richard. He had been trying desperately to reach me for days without success, and something in his gut had told him something was deeply wrong. When he stepped out of that truck and saw me standing in the dirt, shivering, limping, and clutching his granddaughter in the freezing cold, his entire face changed. Every soft expression disappeared and was replaced by something quiet, hard, and completely resolved. He checked my ankle, wrapped his jacket around the baby without saying a word, and then opened the passenger door and looked at me with calm certainty. He said, "Get in. This ends tonight." And I believed him completely. Rather than driving us to safety and dealing with things in the morning, my father turned the truck around and drove straight back to Beatrice's estate. He pulled into the driveway with a force that announced his arrival before he even reached the door. He did not knock. He walked straight in, and the sound of his presence filled every room, and Julian and Beatrice were seated in the living room like nothing unusual had happened. And when they saw my father standing there, they immediately shifted into their usual mode of threats and condescension. Beatrice told him he was trespassing. Julian told him to leave. But my father did not move a single inch backward. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded legal document, which he placed on the table in front of them with a steady hand. Before retiring, my father had spent decades as a respected commercial contractor. The previous year, Beatrice had hired his company to carry out major renovations on her estate, and she had never paid the final balance owed. My father held a primary commercial lien against the property because of those unpaid debts, a legal claim that gave him significant power over the estate. He looked Beatrice directly in the eyes and gave her one simple choice. She could hand over my car keys and allow me to collect my belongings immediately, or he would begin foreclosure proceedings first thing in the morning, and she would lose the estate entirely. The color drained from Beatrice's face. Julian said nothing. Within minutes, my keys were placed into my father's hand. We loaded my belongings into my car, secured my daughter safely in her seat, and we drove away from that estate and never looked back. 3 months have passed since that night, and my life looks nothing like it did before. I am living in my own bright and peaceful apartment, supported by my own income and my own choices. My divorce from Julian is being finalized because a man who watches his wife fall down a staircase and walks away has shown you everything you need to know about his character. As for Beatrice, the lien my father held proved impossible for her to resolve, and her estate is now moving through forced liquidation. The empire she used to control and isolate me is being dismantled piece by piece. I went from feeling completely invisible on a dark, empty road to standing firmly in my own life again, raising my daughter on my own terms. If my story sounds familiar to you, if you have ever had someone use love or family as an excuse to control you, I want you to know that walking away is not weakness. It is the bravest thing you will ever do.